around education. But in line with the comprehensive plan work that's happening, in line with some of the other changes that have been happening, and especially given a recent effort that we did around the tree bylaw, generated a lot of angst. We felt that it was time for us to reconnect with the community, to refresh ourselves. Frankly, we're getting a little bit worn out, falling into a little bit of a rut. So I think we certainly look from the Sustainability Committee to try and get some energy out of this, but most importantly, to align ourselves to what the needs of the town are. So my hope is through this forum that we'll start to getting that a little bit. We're holding 2 of these. We're doing one today, and there's another one on Thursday at 7 o'clock that we're keeping as purely as a Zoom session. And like I said, this session is being recorded as well. Okay, so that said, my camera's over there, but whatever. We're going to do 2 things today. One, we are proposing a new warrant article. Well, actually, it's an old warrant article, but we're bringing back a warrant article around the opt-in stretch code. But I want to put that in context of why it's important. We've been asked a number of times, even with the tree bylaw, why is this important? So I'm going to try and place some level of context. I'm not going to spend a humongous amount of time on it, but at least kind of show you the kind of priorities that we are focused on, and maybe give you a little bit of an explanation of why we're focused on those priorities. The second thing is, I will talk to you about the opt-in code. My hope is that's me doing the talking. That lasts maybe about 25 minutes or so. And after that, for the remaining time, I'd really like to try and shift the conversation so that you're doing more of the talking. We do plan to use the comprehensive plan suggested meeting in a box framework, but candidly, to gather sustainability feedback. But candidly, we've adapted it more to use it as a tool to construct a conversation and to do a discussion. But we did want to try and focus that more towards sustainability. And our hope is that we'll find that tool useful. We're a small enough group that if you don't like that format, we can change the format and we can adapt it. And if you prefer just doing straight up talking, we can do that too. All right, so on that note, let me get the presentation portion of this at least going. If you'll give me a sec. Oh, wait. Sorry, it's not my machine, so there you go. All right, I do have a habit of speaking extremely fast. If you think I'm doing that, tell me. I'll slow down. Right. Oh. Thank you. I don't know how to do that though. There's Sony.
Green lights on.
At working. Well, might help if I stop pressing. Might help if I stop pressing the standby button and actually press the on button. It did do something, so hopefully I think it's flashing over there, so I can see it turned from red to green and it's just coming up, I think. It's been a while since I've had to do projectors because everything in my life these days is Zoom. So, and does this thing automatically go to the projector, or do I have to do something with it?
Ash, while you're warming up, one thing it occurred to me, we as a select board are looking at this whole 40B permit process and thinking about sustainability factors involved with that development. So I'll give me a chance to speak. So I'll be asking for feedback and input as to how that part of the process and how
Perfect.
that works.
Perfect.
So it's something.
Perfect. Perfect. All right. Okay. So for those of you who don't know us, right, we've been our major focus continues to really focus on achieving net zero. So back in 19, I think it was that the town sort of voted to achieve, set a goal for ourselves for, try and achieve net zero carbon by 2040. It's a little bit more aggressive than the state goal. I will tell you we're not on track. But our focus then started trying to achieve, really focused on trying to come up with strategies that would help us achieve 2040, right? So during that work, we have run a greenhouse gas survey. We've, trying to understand the basic data that should guide our strategy. We've come up with a plan. The town adopted, the strategy portion of that plan at least. And then we've done some incremental work around engagement, around talking to people on multiple forums, as I talked about it. We've provided feedback on major projects that the town might be doing. And in addition, we've sponsored a number of warrants that are really in line with that net zero plan. Most recently, an ex-member of ours, Rob, really led the foundation of the Energize Ashland group, which is brilliant. We were trying to get some, a grassroots effort going in town around sustainability as well. And as I said, we have run into a few challenges. We're a pretty small team. A lot of us have been serving on the board for a period of time, so there is a level of fatigue that set in at this stage because, kind of get into the little bit of rut. So again, one of the reasons that we wanted to do it. We have had some churn on the committee as well, so we've got, thankfully now, a little bit of new members as well. Amanda's on, but we've had limited engagement. So that as I gave you on my start off, right? That's sort of part of the point of this. So what I really need from you right now is to help us refresh our vision and focus areas, right? Joel told me that he's going to come in and yell at me a little bit. I actually want you to yell at me. That's great, right? But yell about all points of view.
Now?
Give me like 20 minutes, and then you can yell at me. Okay. But then just yelling at me is not sufficient. Actually get engaged. Actually help us through these efforts, because it's easy to just tell us what to do without necessarily having full context. So get involved, help us sort of form the points of view, and that would be really appreciated. And then very, very short term, I certainly hope that you'll come into town meeting and help us support the adoption of the opt-in code, so that's very narrow. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on all of these slides, but the important thing to take away from this one is, this is what really is informing a lot of our thinking, the data on this slide, right? And what we really were trying to get out of this slide was which areas of focus are there, which contribute the most to carbon in town, right? And how we should think about it, right? So, and the biggest thing to take away is it basically splits between buildings and transportation, right? We don't have a lot of industry in town as such, so it really breaks down between building and transportation. And when you kind of keep that in mind, when people ask me, why are you focusing on the initiatives that you're focusing on? The reason why we focus on it is because if we have to try and solve for our net zero carbon goal, it's really about achieving a balance. It's about reducing emissions and then finding ways to expand the absorption effects that might exist. And because the reality is, I don't care what we do collectively, we're not going to reduce emissions enough to basically go to zero, right? That there's no pathway to that right now. So all you can do is do the most you can, be the most efficient you can to reduce your emissions, reduce that impact, but then find ways to sort of absorb it as well, which is why we've kind of focused in the recent past on a few key items, right? So we focused on energy supply. We've been working with Michael, others, to make sure that the supply of energy to the town is coming from 100% renewable sources, especially as it concerns the electric grid, right? We haven't, however, at this stage, had the opportunity or, frankly, the appetite in town to go straight out ban fossil fuels in town, right? The state makes it really difficult to do that anyway. There are programs out there in the state, and I certainly have members of my committee that have advocated very heavily that we should try and get a home rule adjustment and just try it out, just like Brookline and some of the other towns have done it. But we did advocate for it. We've certainly voted on it as a town. In a town meeting, letting the senator know, and letting our representatives know that Ashland really wants to see that happen. But separate from that, what we have done is, at least for municipal buildings, we have passed warrant articles that say that the town government itself is going to start, one, accounting for the cost of carbon in the life cycle, and two, will start actually considering things that don't use fossil fuel first, unless there's just no way that you can make it work, right? Because in some cases, for example, for the fire engine, moving to a fully electric fire engine is really not feasible technology-wise yet, right? So that's happened. But the important thing there is that our focus has been on let's try and shift things towards electricity and then make that grid, as renewable as we can, right? So that's number one. The second being buildings. Obviously, you saw in the previous chart, right, they make up a big portion. And it's mainly around heating, cooling, those are the things that really contribute. So a shift towards that. We've run programs around it. But there our priority is really the expansion of use of things like heating pumps for both commercial and residents. And then we'll talk about the stretch code and the opt-in code right now. But we're also recommending to the select board that, we do invest in or at least consider, passing approval for a PACE program, do a lot more education on it. So those are areas of focus. Transportation then, is around EVs and EV charging infrastructure. But also be thoughtful about, and this is where we want to try and influence the comprehensive plan. This is more short term on the slide, but be thoughtful about how, as a town, we want to live and play, in terms of whether it's public transportation or, how we should think about the rail transit district and the fact that we have commuter rail in town, right? Those are key decisions to make because those are the things that will allow us to kind of reduce the usage of private cars. That said, the reality is that Ashland is a suburban neighborhood. Depending on where you live in town, pretty much for everyone, unless you're living right next to it, supermarkets are about between 4 to 7 miles away. You are going to drive somewhat, right? So how do we think about the planning of the town so that we can reduce that and make more of the common areas in town sort of more walkable, more friendly, so that you don't have to necessarily drive to everything. So that's sort of a big component. And then on the absorption side of the world, I think this is where we got into a lot of debate this year, especially around, the tree bylaw. And one of the reasons why I pulled back from the tree bylaw is, really thinking about what are the right strategies to follow to really create the kind of ecosystem support and controls in place so that we are retaining and maintaining, but also expanding the natural systems that help us absorb carbon, right? So those hopefully give you an idea. And again, I'll just keep moving here. So if you've now kind of got a concept of the why we're doing what we're doing, there's a heavy push towards electrification. One question I get asked pretty often is, while the electric grid is not 100% renewable, even if you're buying credits and our aggregation program is renewable, just shifting to electric doesn't eliminate fossil fuels. The reality is that that's the one part of the energy network that actually is shifting towards renewable energy and has probably the most likely path towards going as renewable as we can as a country, right? So that's why the move towards electrification sort of has the most promise, because the reality is if you keep building houses or keep driving cars that use gas, then you're using it. You're using a fossil fuel anyway, and that you're going to burn it. So there's no way of reduction there, right? All right. So let's talk about the stretch code. And again, I promise I'll spend as little time, but I'd love for you to ask questions, right? What is the opt-in code? We presented this, I think it was 2 town meetings back. The opt-in code did not pass, but what the opt-in stretch code is Massachusetts released this as an addition to the stretch code, right? So we are a green community. We've been a green community for, I think, a few years now. And we already have the stretch code that applies to us. But the opt-in code really takes it up a level. It's intended to try and meet Massachusetts goals towards achieving net zero by 2050. Personally, we don't feel it goes quite far enough, but it's the best thing we have right now. And the goal really is to promote sustainability, increase energy efficiency, but most importantly, stop investing in fossil fuel-based new buildings, right? So it doesn't impact existing buildings, but really impacts the new capacity that'll be getting built now and will likely live for the next 30 to 100 years in town. So it really starts thinking about how we can sort of move that towards a more sustainable building. Slightly busy slide, but I've talked about this already, so I won't drain it, but the reality is that buildings are that largest source of emissions for Ashland, right? And if we don't change the way we heat and cool our buildings, there's no way we're achieving any of the goals that we've set out there, right? And so the shift right now, it's about 2 to 4. This is a slightly dated graphic, but 2 to 4% of our buildings are largely electric. You'll notice that vast majority is still natural gas and oil. And even though we've made good progress in the recent past with at least the 2 big projects that we took on in town for municipal buildings where they are net zero ready, most of the new houses that are being built still do rely on fossil fuel, right? So what the stretch code would do then is really expand past the, the specialized code would do then is expand past the stretch code. So, you know, there are 3 of them. You've kind of got it. So I'm actually going to go to what it does. All right. So what it contains in it is that all new buildings must either be fully electric or should be pre-wired for electric. And that's an important distinction in that the opt-in code does not ban fossil fuels. It doesn't require that all buildings that all buildings be electric. There is a pathway. There are multiple pathways actually listed in the code that require you to use fossil fuels, but then it increases the efficiency requirements for those buildings, right? But the important thing here is that it actually requires that even if you're using a fossil fuel, so if you're using natural gas for heating your house, it is being built in a manner so that the wiring for you to switch to fully electric is already built into the house. It is much cheaper while the house is being built, while the walls are open for you to put the wiring in, versus trying to retrofit afterwards. So thank you. So that's precisely what it does. It just says put the dang pre-wiring in, and then you have optionality in the future, right? The second thing it does say is buildings that you're using fossil fuels must include on-site solar, right? So it's really offsetting then the use of fossil fuels and expanding the renewable capacity for the state, for the town as well, right? But again, there are exemptions there. So if it's a shaded lot, you know, you can actually apply and get an exemption for it. And then for large buildings, whether it's a new single-family house that's greater than 4,000 square feet, or multifamily homes that are greater than 12,000 square feet, that's where the requirements do get more stringent. So you, in those cases, either go full electric or become a passive home, which basically means that you're effectively at the net zero level. Your consumption of energy is effectively being balanced out in other ways. So the goal here is really to take it and sort of say all new buildings must either be fully electric, or if they're not, then they should at least have pre-wiring. They should have, if you are using fossil fuels, then it should have solar. And that's pretty much it. That's the sort of simple piece that's left, because there was a lot more complexity when we tried to adopt this early on, like a couple of years back, or was it a year back? And a lot of the requirements that were very confusing now are actually going to become part of the stretch code in July 2024 anyway. So we, as a green community, already have that as our base code effectively. All those things are going to apply to us anyway. So voting for the opt-in code effectively gives us these additional sort of 3 things in there, because everything else is sort of just simplified out now.
What's the effective date if it gets voted?
So if it gets adopted at town meeting, we have to take at least 6 months for it to go into effect. So it would be January 2025 that would actually go into effect. And that's primarily so that people can adapt it, and can, we can go through training. In our case, we've actually done a lot because Doug and others in town have actually done a lot of work on this already, and have started sort of aligning to it. So it should really not be that heavy a lift at this stage.
Want a question now, or you want to later?
You can ask me questions.
I'm just curious, because I talked to somebody at the building commission side too, and there seems to be still confusion about what it is and what they're already doing right now. Are you sure that the town really knows the difference between these 3 different stretch codes and what's going on in July to begin with? Because I think there's still confusion.
So I can't talk about everyone in town. Obviously, I can't possibly try and say that everybody in town is not confused. People I'm talking to, the people who are sort of actually running with this thing, I would say there should not be confusion, because I've certainly had those conversations. If there are people who are having confusion, we have now a fairly sizable body of materials that we can share. I'm personally happy to have a conversation and help clarify any doubts there are. And we're not the only ones. At this stage, there are more than 33 towns that have adopted it. This is fairly well understood at this stage. And again, the data on this, the clarity on this is actually quite good. We've also made the step of actually engaging with Dylan Patel, who's actually from the DOER. He's been engaging with Sam directly. Oh, he's right here, sorry. I saw you walk out, so, he's been with us, he's been actually guiding us. So we have access to resources, very directly. Dylan's been very kind with his time as well. He's also working, I think him and his colleagues are working with Hopkinton as well, who's also considering the same thing. So we're no longer an isolated community who's trying to do this, right? It's actually a fairly well understood process at this stage. Chuck.
I just wanted to say, building codes are complicated, and none of us are going to understand these completely. That's what we have a building.
Chuck, just keep in mind, for the recording,
Yeah.
they won't be able to hear you, so
Yeah.
you may want to have people go to the
So,
microphone.
why don't you reserve your comment? Let me just get through the next two slides, and then you can come back and provide this thing. I'll give the mic to you in a second.
We would want to miss your wisdom.
Yeah. All right, for those of you who can't hear it, we're effectively letting Chuck know that we wouldn't want to miss his wisdom. All right. So, but in reality, though, these are the three things that are the differential at this stage between what we already will have in July 2024 and are opting into the stretch code. And Dylan, if I mentioned anything wrong there, feel free to come up here. So perfect, thank you. And you are the expert there, so we'll take your word on it. All right. Some things you should know. These were questions that really came up at the last town meeting, or questions that have been asked. First one, this code only applies to new construction. No one's going to make you go change your existing. Though personally, I think there's so many incentives out there right now that if you are at a life cycle change where your HVAC is going out, you really ought to be going towards a heat pump or a electric based water heater at this stage, right? But regardless, this code focuses on new construction. Two, there's now plenty of data, and I'm happy to share that data, around the added construction cost. And depending on the study, it's, I'm being fairly wide-ranging here, right? But most studies actually talk about it as being under 1% change. And I've actually got a couple of studies that I can refer to right now if I do get questioned. But the reality is that it's about 1 to 4%. But then if you take into account sort of all the incentives that are in place right now, as well as the life cycle of the property, in terms of running the property itself, right? Which is one of the things that we're asking the town to do now when they start considering decisions like this, is to actually think about the full life cycle cost. Then it actually does go to under 1%, differential at this stage. And the data, by the way, is not just about very large buildings. The data I'm talking about, is inclusive of commercial, it's inclusive of high rises, it's inclusive of affordable housing for that matter, where there's pretty clear, at this stage, or especially over the last 3 years, we're pretty clear data that building net zero is actually now becoming, actually just like anything else. The code is not a ban on fossil fuels, right? There was concerns. Personally, I would go for it, even if it was there, but there are concerns in the community, so I will put that out there as well. There are multiple paths to complying to the code. And then the other piece is, we have as a town always been a little bit of a leader. We haven't always been on the very tippy edge of everything, but we've been pretty far out there, especially as you look at the communities that are surrounding us. In fact, it was a little disappointing that when Ashland chose not to adopt the opt-in code, the fact that Ashland chose not to adopt the opt-in code was actually used as a rationale at other town meetings of surrounding towns, because they said Ashland didn't do it, so we shouldn't do it. But separate from that, we've actually always been we have always been seen as a climate leader, right? We were one of the first communities to adopt the green community designation as well. And Dylan's actually leading an effort right now where we've got a climate leader program that's coming out. So that's sort of the version 2.0 of green communities. And one of the requirements for you to be a climate leader is the adoption of the opt-in code. It's also the existence of a team like a sustainability committee, right? So we actually check off a lot of the boxes. This would be one of the boxes we have to check off that we can't today. And once we do achieve that designation, it does unlock a whole bunch of additional grant opportunities. And we've successfully leveraged the green communities grant opportunities. I think I've got slightly dated data because Sam was out, so I couldn't quite get it and updated this, but I know of at least about 700K of grant opportunities that Ashland has received, and I think we may have done a little bit more than that. So, I didn't want to use inflated numbers, so I'm kind of going with the more conservative number on that one. This is a list of some of the communities. I know there are actually a couple more that I'm missing here. I haven't quite updated. The list continues to grow, I think, pretty consistently. But about 31 to, I think at this stage it's about 33 communities. We've talked a lot about this. Here's some of the sources on data. Sorry, my slide seems to have gotten a little munched up when I converted it, but some of the data I was talking about, I'm not going to drain it, but if someone's interested, I'm happy to share links out with them. But again, the takeaway here is, it's in that, 1 to 4% range, and you'll notice with the graph out there, it is pretty much all types of properties. The most interesting study actually was the Built Environment Plus study, because they've actually been aggressively going after collecting data for net zero buildings specifically, right? And they've been now tracking, especially since 2021 to 2023, so it's actually very recent. They just published in February 2023 this data set, where they've been tracking about 30 million square feet of built net zero built area buildings. And of those, about 7 million have reported their costs. And the chart that you actually see on the side is actually an aggregation of that 7 million. So this is real data, I'm not making it up, right? And it does sort of go all through the different things. The details we won't drain this here. I've kind of already summarized this up for you, but this is the actual code itself. And the thing to take away here as well is, again, the things in yellow are the things that would really apply because of the opt-in code. Everything else is sort of already factored in, anyway. And that's, a little bit about the Climate Leader Program. That was sort of the bulk of what I wanted to kind of share about the opt-in code. I'll pause now. Someone wants to ask a question. I'll be happy to answer questions, or if you've got a comment, I'll step aside and let you sort of take.
Can I make a few comments?
Can you put that last slide up as well real quick? I just want to take a picture of that. Yeah,
Which one? I can send you the slides. You don't have to take pictures.
Yeah.
This one, yeah?
Yeah, thank you.
I'm happy to send you links to the studies as well.
Yeah, Ash has the technology. Well, thank you, Ash. That was a great presentation. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Robert Scher. I'm the current chair of the Ashland Select Board. And the Select Board has supported this article at town meeting. And so I would urge everyone watching this to come out and support it. Ash has made a very effective presentation. This will be our second or third attempt at this. And I do want to, as I look out on a lot of my friends on sustainability here, I would, you folks have been on the front line of us achieving our net zero plan, which started, 3 years ago? And so it's a set of small steps, and I would just ask you to stay involved. I intend to stay involved in no matter what role I'm in. And we're all aware of how important this is for not only for us, but for our children and grandchildren. My first grandchild was just born. So imagine the world that he's going to be living in if we don't fix this, right? So, that's really the essential reality here. So the one thing, and the other thing I wanted to point out in terms of the pipeline of new development, which we're all aware of, and some of us think have various opinions about the type of housing being built and how much there should be, but there is without a doubt a continuing building. And so it would really be, I think, extremely unfortunate if these large developments are built without this stretch code being in effect. And also, in this stretch code, if I understand, it still allows the use of gas, fossil fuel. So, and that's, I think, really another unfortunate point if that continues. And I think we need to think about using all our resources to work with developers. And as an example, this committee was extremely successful in dealing with two of the largest recent large town buildings, the Mendez School and the Public Safety Building, to have air source heat pumps and some kind of hybrid system. So that was really a great success, which you folks should feel proud about. And I just want to, we should think about how we can continue that trend into commercial buildings. We've got a lot in the pipeline, and that's another reason that this should be passed as soon as possible. I asked about the effective date. We've got a number of projects in the pipeline. And the other thing I want to point out is many of you were involved in the Eversource pipeline issue. Do you remember that? So we haven't heard about it for a few years. So we all think it's hopefully dead. But if you remember, they wanted to expand the gas pipeline going through Ashland. One of their rationales was increased demand in the future for natural gas. And we basically made a case to them that that wasn't necessarily so, and the administration pretty much supports that position because you should be doing air source heat pumps and electricity, et cetera. So we're not going to expand gas pipelines. So, but we need to keep the pressure on to prove ourselves right, that there isn't a demand for increased gas. So, you know, look at what you're doing in the face of all these things. We want the Eversource gas pipeline to stay a dead issue, to not come back. So anyway, but I appreciate you letting me speak here. And I would just, one thing to think about concretely in the next few weeks as we do these meetings about this 40B permit and people get input not only to the comprehensive plan, but that whole process. Think about the best way to work with the developer about making sure that they're going electric, they're putting on solar panels, they're minimizing the use of gas. By the way, we've had a number of incidents with gas scares at one of our new apartment complexes where people, the gas is being left on and people are calling the fire department, and we're incurring municipal costs to deal with a relatively new process, project that probably should have done something different, frankly. But anyway, so thank you for those comments. Yes. Well, that's a good question. Right now we have. So I got a question about the 40B public input process. So we had talked about our meeting last week and decided to have in effect, a public forum session at our next meeting on April 17th, which is a regular select board meeting, and then a follow-up after town meeting, our first meeting, which I think is around May 15th, I want to say. So that's the current state of it. Now, it's a good question of whether we should have, instead of doing it at our meeting, at a regular select board meeting, to have a special public forum. So that's an interesting question. We didn't have that discussion, but it seems like there's a lot of interest, and maybe that's worthwhile as a separate thing. But we've set up systems to collect comments, as I think you know, so go to the town website and look at that in the Facebook page. So that process is really just beginning. But does that answer your question, Lauren?
Yes.
Great. All right. Thank you all. Does anybody have questions for me, or? No?
No, just,
Why do we have, I think Chuck had a hand first, and then right after that?
Slide forward so that it's just the topic slide. So we're not.
So a couple things. One is, you know, we're going to hear that, oh, it's much more expensive to run air source heat pumps. And that's true in the short run, but in the long run, it's going to go the other way. And it's a little complicated to explain this, but the way the gas company prices gas is that they get a 10% return on what they've invested every year for 20 years, which is to say they make some money at this, which of course they're in business, they should, right? And the problem is that, you know, that the return comes out of the number of ratepayers. And as you begin to get fewer and fewer ratepayers because of all the things that the state and the feds are doing to encourage electrification, you get the cost is, the amount that they're getting back is not cut. It's just over fewer and fewer ratepayers until, of course, it gets unbelievably expensive to use gas. And the catch here is that, of course, the people who are going to pay that are the people in apartments where the landlord doesn't want to invest any more money. And, of course, it will be the poorest people in the community, the people who, by and large, people who live in apartments tend to be poorer than the rest of us. So I just want everybody to understand that, yes, okay, this year, maybe the next 5 years, it's going to be a little more expensive to have air source heat pumps, although not ground source heat pumps. But that's a short-term process.
Chuck, can I ask you a question? Or
Yeah.
it's not, whoever, your discussion reminded me of these pilot projects with ground source heat networks that the gas company is doing in various places.
At Framingham,
Yeah, are we in
no,
the pipeline, are we in the pipeline for that at all?
I don't believe so.
Dylan might actually be in a better position to answer that since he's
Yeah, all right.
yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I don't believe Ashland is, and so there are two projects, there are two separate programs going on. One is by a nonprofit called HEAT, H-E-E-T, not H-E-A-T, and they're doing, they've been funding feasibility studies for, I think, 10 to 15 towns, and I don't think Ashland is one of them. However, I think those, once that is all done, hopefully they can increase the number of projects that they're funding. The other is within DOER, and so when and if Ashland becomes a climate leader, we might consider funding studies, and then eventually the investment program for it for network geothermal. Right now, under our Climate Leaders program, we are considering enhanced incentives for the studies and for the investment in building level ground source heat pumps. But I can't guarantee this, but we might consider in the future, once all of these pilots are done and the economics works out, we could consider network geothermal.
Did you tell me what you were back around this?
So yes, I apologize for arriving late. There was traffic, but I'm Dylan Patel. I am the Northeast Regional Coordinator for the Green Communities Program within the Department of Energy Resources. I've been working with Ash on organizing this hearing, this public meeting, and I've also been working with about a dozen municipalities so far this spring, actually, and maybe about 15 in total on the specialized stretch code. Yes?
Can you talk a little bit about the Climate Leader Program?
Of course. So the Climate Leaders Program is a program that we are rolling out this year. It's not going to replace the Green Communities Program. It's going to, like I said, it's going to provide enhanced incentives, and I use that word very generally because we have a funding mechanism for that, but we haven't done the calculations yet. So we can't give any details about how much we can fund, but essentially once a community becomes designated as a climate leader, and the designation process has 5 criteria, of which the specialized stretch code is one, having a committee is another one. The municipality would be eligible for 2 sets of grants. One is your non-capital intensive grants, so things like paying for feasibility studies, engineering studies, funding for, you have an energy manager, but for municipalities that don't, for that position. And for your capital intensive projects, we can fund renewable energy, so solar, ground source heat pumps, and other kinds of technologies that fall outside of our green community scope.
Any other questions?
Dylan, thank you for making the team. You weren't I know you had another commitment, and so thank you for doing that. Great resource if you've got questions on the opt-in code. I'm not the expert here, so honestly, if you have questions right now, it's a great time to answer those questions.
Hi.
Yeah.
Hi, quick question on the opt-in code.
Yes.
Because I thought I remember this from previous incarnations where we discussed this as a community.
Yeah.
Is there any, are these codes required for future development, and developers need to adhere to those codes, or, and in making that a requirement, if that's the case, do developers somehow benefit from this? Are we offering them more lenient zoning codes in any way? In other words, is there a trade being made here?
Okay, I understand.
I'm going to call it a bargain with the devil.
Okay, I understand the question now. So there is no trade-off. Any new developer has to abide by whatever code is in place within that community, be it base, stretch, specialized. There are no, there are rebates that the developer could access through Mass Save, through the IRA, and that's what helps drive down the cost. And that's what makes the specialized stretch code cost competitive. But there are no accelerated decision making, shall we say, should a developer abide by this, because everybody's subject to it. So there's no special treatment because everybody is subject to it.
If you had to make a case that you don't agree with, here are a few of the drawbacks that are commonly perceived, what would they be?
Okay, so there's the big two. One is that a lot of builders and developers are pushing back on our cost estimates, which is very fair because they have the experience, they have the practical knowledge of actually doing everything. To that, and I understand that, with the way the economy is right now, we are seeing a lot of inflation, we are seeing a lot of supply chain issues. So I would respond to that in two ways. One is that I think that's a short-term issue. I think over the medium to long term, we're going to see interest rates decrease. We're going to see building materials, hopefully the supply chain issues will resolve themselves. The other is that the feedback I've heard from a lot of builders is that, we're just going to have to spend a lot more in insulation and insulating the crap out of, insulating the entire thing so many times over. Yeah, we've got the First Amendment, which was great. I'm not going to claim that I have more experience than a builder, but I think doing more insulation is not always the right answer. You've got to do the air sealing. So where you have the wall hitting the ceiling, you've got to do the firm insulation, the closing all of those gaps, making sure the building is airtight, and that goes beyond the slab, the wall, and the attic insulation. That's really making sure any gaps that you have are sealed. And I think that's what in my opinion, I think that's maybe what a lot of builders are missing. The other is a kind of a worry that there's either not enough grid capacity or there's not enough electrical capacity at the house. So I completely agree that we are seeing a shortage of 400 amp panels right now. It's very possible, especially with a small to medium-sized house, to run all electric on a 200 amp panel. Once you go beyond 4,000 square feet, that's probably where you do want that larger panel. Again, supply chain issue, we hope it will work out. In terms of grid resiliency, we have a lot of policy direction working on strengthening the grid. We have the Grid Modernization Advisory Council. Eversource is investing a lot of money in grid modernization. And you also have to understand, in a fossil fuel home, your gas boiler or furnace does have an electric computer or an electric pilot. That's going to trip out when the grid goes out. So you're not safe even if you have a fossil fuel backup, fossil fuel heating system. For those who are really worried, you can have a fossil fuel-based backup generator, and you'll still be counted as all electric.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
So, obviously we're talking about new construction.
Yes.
However, and I can speak to this when I go up next as well, but I'd love your feedback on this initially, is a lot of the confusion is around existing structures.
Yes.
So when you do it 1,000 square foot, you shake your head, it's confusion around.
It's confusion, and I completely understand, but yeah, continue, please.
It's a reality in my world. I'm a principal at an architecture firm. I do with lots of builders, lots of building inspectors, lots of other architects. Again, I was at the DOER webinar on the 27th.
Yeah.
At that?
Yeah. The listening session.
That was pretty intense.
It was less intense than I thought it would
It
be,
was still
but
comment
it
from
was,
the
yes,
positive
it was, yeah.
So the question is, when you have a structure, at least what they're telling us, you add on 1,000 square feet to a small caper ranch in Ashland, if we do the specialized code, does that mean the rest of the house has to be brought up to that same specialized code? Or if it's 50% of a remodel or greater, does it also have to adhere to that as well? That is a question I hear a lot from builders. That's questions I hear from building inspectors. I work throughout New England doing design work, and literally with the 351 towns in Massachusetts, I have to now speak directly with each of the building commissioners and inspectors prior to doing design work to get their feedback on what their particular town is doing or what they're implementing. It's still, with this whole issue, the wild, wild west with how decisions are being made related to the stretch going up to the specialized code, in particular with existing structures. So for Massachusetts to get to net zero by 2050, how do you get these existing structures to comply when it's incredibly cost prohibitive to do so, meaning all new windows, the siding has to come off, have to put on continuous insulation. People that are on fixed incomes cannot afford to do that. And so what building inspectors are telling us to do is to do an addition at 999 square feet. Then if you're doing a remodel, pull a permit just for that 999 square feet so you don't have to deal with that particular part of the code. It's a fascinating time we're in, my friend, but how would you answer that question? If you go over 1,000 square feet, would you have to then comply with the specialized code?
No. That's the short answer. No. Absolutely not.
How about a remodel?
No.
So if you combine an addition with a remodel,
No.
okay,
New construction only.
all right.
The stretch code is where, okay. So the stretch code is I think where you have your beef, your concerns with. And so regardless of what Ashland votes on in the Springtown meeting, this is going to happen come July, regardless of what happens in town meeting.
Correct.
After July 1st, 2024, for permits pulled for extensive renovations, your long form alterations, the specialized stretch code only affects new construction. That's it. And there are two layers of the trigger. So you're correct that it's 1,000 square feet, but it also has to be 50%. So it's either, if I'm remembering correctly, it's 1,000 square feet or 50% of the conditioned floor area. And if it's an addition, it has to be 1,000 square feet and 100% of the conditioned floor area. So basically it has to be a doubling of the conditioned floor area. So if you do 1,000 square feet and you have a 1,200 square foot home, it's not going to trigger.
Well, part of that confusion is they're now saying full basements need to comply as part of the square footage.
That depends if it's conditioned.
Right.
Yeah.
That's not what
And so I completely understand that builders are frustrated. And I will say that, DOER and BBRS are, trying to get a lot of the information out. Mass Save offers free training. I really want to, get that point across. Mass Save offers free training for builders and architects and code inspectors. And a few towns have actually organized some in-person trainings for building developers and for building commissioners. So there's a lot of information out there for people, whoever, to understand the intricacies of the stretch code.
But Dylan, is it fair for me to say that as far as we're concerned, again, just to represent, the stretch code already applies to us?
Yes.
We are a green community. So one way or the other, that confusion is going to happen, and in July those changes are going to apply to us regardless. The conversation here is the opt-in code, which will then become our new code. But everything you just talked about is already built into our existing process because we already have the stretch code applying to us. The discussion here is really more on the opt-in code, which is purely focused on new construction. Is that a correct?
That's completely correct.
Okay. Any other questions, Dylan? And Dylan, I think you're going to be here for another few minutes at least.
I can stay as long as I need to. My car's charging, so the longer I stay, the more I get charged.
All right, then we'll maybe transition over and see if others have questions. You want to go up next?
Sure, just have a quick comment. So Glenn Travis, I live on Franklin Road, and then I also, I'm the principal at GMT Home Designs. It's the same building that Tricia Kendall works in as well, and I love what I do. We do mostly residential design work and then some light commercial projects. And the reason why that's important is that I'm an advocate for what you do. The Sustainability Committee, I know it sounds like you've grown a little weary, but keep fighting the good fight. It's one of those things where, it's about educating the masses, right? It's about letting people know what are their options. And I think for the first time, actually in a long time, you're the first person to give me a straight answer on my question about 1,000 square feet plus or a remodel. A lot of folks are trying to figure that out. But the reason why I'm here today as well is, number one, to say I support what you do. So I think that's really critical to know this. I do work with a lot of builders throughout the state of Massachusetts trying to figure this whole thing out, and a lot of different building inspectors, different architects as well. And so where I fall is I'm a man who drives a Tesla, who has 50 solar panels on his roof. So I'm speaking from a position of I'm all for being green. There's a whole segment on my website about different material choices consumers can make about being green. What has been, if I may be frank, frustrating since the beginning of 2023 is the adoption of the IECC code related to insulation. That's where a lot of the confusion lies, meaning the IECC basically talks about the need for dealing with thermal breaks, which again, I just did an addition on my home in 2022, and I added the zip. You ever see you drive by these buildings, you see that zip paneling? Well, you can buy it with rigid insulation as part of that. You can get it in different thicknesses. And so in order to deal with the air, the barriers that you're dealing with, when you have studs in a wall, that's an issue of a thermal break. When you put a blanket on the outside of a building, i.e. continuous insulation, it deals with that thermal break. And then you tape it. It's a tremendous difference when you go into my 1979 built home and then go into my brand new addition. The change in the heat and the cooling is dramatic because I wrapped that addition in this blanket. My point in sharing all that with you is we have to figure out a way in Ashland to, sure, with new buildings, I'm for and I'm an advocate for adopting this specialized code. I think it's fantastic. And I'm glad they have still in there so that we can kind of figure this out. We've got to be able to walk before we can run, the ability for people to still use some fossil fuels, right? Even when my house was built, there was no, it's oil heat. And so that's like, I got to do something. So I put on the solar panels, and it's made a big difference with the electrical pieces. And so what I want to be able to do is get straight answers, which I haven't been able to get from the state when it comes to the energy codes with insulation. Because I've lost clients because I've told them from a conservative perspective, if you do over 1,000 square feet, you're going to need to have a U value of your windows of 0.3, which is pretty significant, and add continuous insulation on the rest of your home, which means removing your siding. That's where we've actually lost a number of clients last year because they couldn't afford to do the addition plus wrap their existing house. So that's my concern with these communities. Even in Lincoln, I've done projects in Lincoln who have adopted the specialized code. I know the inspector Mark well. He didn't know how to answer me with a attic remodel of 1,400 square feet. How does that affect the rest of this house? Right. And so that's really my question for you, is that we're going to have to address that in a very succinct, clear way so that the builders in town and the developers in town understand the ramifications of that in a positive way. You follow me?
Yeah.
And so if I can get a handle on that, I'm an advocate for being green because we're the tip of the spear as a design firm. And we want to make sure that we help people come on board with what this means, but the cost model has to kind of get in line. So where I fall out is, let's do this with new construction, but with existing buildings in town or older homes in town, we still have to figure out how to deal with that whole retrofit with the insulation. Thank you.
Glenn, just a question.
Yeah.
before you, thank you for coming to this. Have you had discussions with our building inspector, Doug? And
So Doug, I built a relation with Doug because I GC'd the, 500 square foot family room addition on my home. So I got to talk to him pretty regularly then. But that was just prior to, so I've come in and talked to him about different projects. And the answer I do get pretty regularly is, well, if you're over that threshold of 1,000 square feet or 50% remodel or above, consult with a HERS rater. Never in my life have I, and I've been doing this since 2003, consult with a HERS rater. Since when are the gospel now with a HERS rater? Which I found to be fascinating because they're so few and far between, where a lot of building inspectors are punting on answering the question with these existing structures.
My concern, I don't want to go to town meeting with these kind of, without a clear answer, at least from our building inspector. Have you had that discussion, Ash, with Bill for this?
So, I don't think I'm qualified to have a HERS rater conversation because I'm a software developer by profession, not a builder. But what I will say is that Doug has spent, especially since especially since we reduced especially since the opt-in code did not pass last year, Doug's done a ton of work in, I may have stepped on a cable. Sorry. Big feet, can't help it.
That was my hope, that we'd spend this time resolving these questions.
Yes.
Yeah, so we have, so again, I think more recently, we've certainly had that conversation. I'm happy to go back to Doug and again reconfirm that. And, with Dylan's engagement now, Sam's been working pretty closely with Dylan, so we should be able to, follow through. And I think, Dylan, to your point, if Mass Save has that free training, I'll ask you the question, like, would it be useful for us to actually maybe bring that to town as well as a session that
No question, because again, right now the HERS rating that we're seeing is around 55 to 52.
Yeah.
So when you go from 55 down to 45 or 42, depending if you're using heat pumps or fossil fuels, that dictates that 45 or 52.
You may want to explain what a HERS rating is, because I have no idea.
He's the next, it's an energy rating system.
I actually might
So they
have
use
a-
software to look at your home and go, okay, what kind of heat
I
loss
took it
is
out.
happening in your home at different areas? And so in order to compensate for that heat loss or heat gain, you use different building materials. For example, what we're using now almost predominantly is spray foam insulation, which some people are afraid of, but I use it quite a bit. We have open and closed cell spray foam to get to the rating that you need in order for it to pass. So years ago, the houses in Ashland had bad insulation between the studs of R13, which is so little, and the air gaps between all that was insane. So then when you go to spray foam, now there's no gaps. Now there's no air leakage, and then you put a blanket of continuous insulation on the outside. It's a well-built home, but it's not 1% more for that.
So
Spray foam's 4 times more expensive, but it's worth it long-term.
I'll jump in if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Because you said a lot of stuff which even I got confused on because, again,
I was confusing?
Yeah, because it's technical to you. I mean, it's simple stuff for you.
Yeah.
Rob, the way I understand HERS rating, because I spend a lot of time trying to understand it because it's all over this code, think of it as a miles per gallon type rating for your house. So super simple terms. They basically took a house that was built, I think, in the 2006 as the standard. And they said, that is number 100.
Yeah.
Okay, they gave that a rating of 100. So they averaged it out and said the energy efficiency of that house, HERS literally is Home Energy Rating System, right? That's what HERS stands for. And a 2006 built house, that's 100. So from there, it goes backwards, right? So the more efficient the house, it's basically saying 100 is the baseline. The lower you go, the more efficient your house is. So when we talk about it in terms of the stretch code in July 2024, for example, the stretch code will require a HERS rating of 45. That means it's going to need to be 55% more efficient than the house that was built in 2006. Did
Excellent
I do a good
answer.
job?
Phenomenal.
All right, lovely.
Well said. But
I'm
again,
gonna go
if you
sit
can
down now.
answer this for the group, which I think will answer it for the town builders and people worried about this, is when you have an existing structure and you need to get that HERS rating, and you need to get that HERS rating of 45, how do you do that? So for example, in Natick, I had an addition, a second story remodel. they said you need to adhere to this Hertz rating, but the rest of the house, it doesn't happen. So they're gonna do a blower tour test, which, you know, it's one way to find out where you're at. They're gonna seal the whole, basically the stairwell, so that the lower level isn't included in that new Hertz rating for a second-story addition on, say, a raised ranch, and so it's problematic with existing structures that we're trying to get answers to, and so that's basically a big reason why I'm here, so go ahead.
Yeah, definitely. So,
I managed to unplug the projector completely. I have no idea what to do with it, sorry.
well, I think we're still probably online. So what is a possibility that we can do before town meeting is organize a builders forum.
Yeah.
So this would be like an online event. We can, I'll work with Ash and Samantha and with you, invite any and all of the builders within town, and we can give a similar presentation, but something that's a little bit more technical. And so what we have, DOER has, we work with a co-consultant, and he and I can come on and we can explain the more technical aspects of the stretch code and the specialized stretch code. So that's an option that I can give to you all. It's just going to require...
And how it relates to the new energy code.
And how it relates to the new energy
That's
code.
a big thing, is this whole energy code and how it impacts both.
Yeah, so that's something that we can definitely do free. Something that might involve a little bit of a cost share or something would be an actual in-person training. Only because there's just so much free stuff online, and the logistics of it as well.
Again, just in the interest, it is important to note that the issues that we're talking about right now, which it's brilliant that we're talking about it, and it's really important. The issues that we're talking about right now apply to the stretch code, which will come into play in July 2024, regardless of how we vote on this thing. The stretch code doesn't augment these issues in any way. The stretch code is just do the pre-wiring and the on-site solar. It's actually quite simple in terms of what the addition is. So as far as town meeting is concerned, secondly, after we vote for it, the opt-in code doesn't even go into effect till Jan. So there's actually enough time. The reason why we've got that time of applicability is to do precisely this kind of training. I think it's a great idea, Dylan, for us to actually organize that forum. I did a presentation for the ABA, which actually had a lot of builders on it, similar slides. We had a pretty good discussion, and I'm more than happy to reach back out to all of them, maybe work with Beth or with Samantha to actually organize a virtual forum, short forum that sort of helps answer some of these questions if you feel that'll be helpful. And then we can actually work with the select board to kind of do the investment in the more sort of detailed forum that you've talked about, which doesn't necessarily have to happen by town meeting, but certainly should happen before July, which is when all these things actually start becoming real for all of us, regardless of whether we vote or not.
The last thing I'd add, to monitor Ashland's compliance with the green communities, we get a database from ResNet to ascertain which buildings are currently meeting the stretch code, which, as you know, is 5255. Even right now, before these changes are coming into effect, we're seeing several multifamily developments going down to the 40s in Ashland.
It's already happening.
Yeah, I don't think I can give the exact addresses, but Pond Street, for example, there's a few things going on down there, and so in Ashland, in many other cities, even though it's not mandated yet, we're seeing quite a few projects, multifamily and single family, going down to 42, 45.
What we're not getting necessarily is the pre-wiring. We're not necessarily getting the on-site. So those are the things that we really need. Because I think you were nodding when I was making the point. When you're building the building is when you want to put the wiring, right? And because otherwise, you're back into the same problem you were talking about, which is now you have a house that is 1,000 square feet plus, and you're going to do an addition, and now there's actually an uplift cost in trying to bring it into code, for the future, which we want to try and avoid. So if anything, this is actually a vote for the future rather than anything else. We've spent good amount of time. I didn't want to interrupt the conversation.
I'm not sure how well you guys are being picked up back there.
Okay, so we've spent a decent amount of time on this topic. I just wanted to do a call to see, are there other questions on the opt-in code? Because I would like to spend at least a little bit of time, got a little bit of a brain trust going here, and good engagement on just other priorities that the Sustainability Committee ought to focus on as well. But again, if there are questions that we really ought to be answering right now, this is excellent. We've got Dylan here, we've got some engagement here, so I'll just pause here. Anybody else have a question on the opt-in code? Brilliant. Okay, I'm gonna ask Kara to come over then, and we'll start talking a little bit about sort of a little bit of future strategy stuff, right? So we are gonna attempt to use the meeting in a box structure that the comprehensive plan is using. We are a small enough group that we won't break up into too many groups, but Joel, this is where we'll try and kind of get the aspiration. And if you guys feel like the construct's not working well, we are a small enough group, we can change the construct, right? So let's use the time, we've got about an hour to really make this useful. And again, guide us. If you'd rather do it a different way and it's not working, let's stop and let's use this time intelligently. So Kara, I'll hand to you. Do you actually need that thing working? Or?
I don't think so,
All right,
because I
good.
printed out. Excuse me. So I'm Kara Hume. I am on the Sustainability Committee, and as well as the Forest Committee. So Chuck and I represent these committees at the Comprehensive Plan. And when we started this forum, and after a meeting at the Comprehensive Plan, I just thought this would be a great opportunity to take these sustainability thoughts and concerns and put them also in the comprehensive plan so that this mindset is reflected there as well. So I hope you brought all your sustainability thoughts so that we can infuse our future with all these great ideas. So the format that we're going to use here today for that is called a meeting in a box. And so we're going to go over some bigger topics. We've kind of condensed it down to 4 different areas so that we can make the most of our time as it pertains to sustainability. I think I'm gonna have, maybe what I'll do is I'll hand out a pen and have everybody sign in on this front page here, just so I can show these are the people that contributed to this today. I think if we want to just jump right into it, the first activity we chose to do is called A Vision for Ashland in 2034. So it starts with a community vision describes what community members want their community to look and feel like in the next decade, which I'm going to add a note that the last comprehensive plan was done well over 10 years ago. So this will probably carry for longer than 10 years, but there's that. It is meant to be hopeful and aspirational. It paints a mental image of what the ideal Ashland will be like in 10 years. A vision helps the community reach for goals above and beyond what may be expected and discover possibilities that may not have been apparent before. So with this in mind, think pie in the sky, dream, and not necessarily be tethered with all the financial or other constraints that will exist in the real world. So our first kind of topic, and if I'm gonna be the scribe, then I'm gonna need to sit with my computer, but
I'm actually going to just invite people to speak.
Okay. So with this being in mind, what does the town look and feel like in 10 years?
I don't like this process.
Okay.
You asked for feedback, I feel like it shouldn't be called meeting in a box. I feel like it should be called boxed in by your meeting format.
How would you like to?
And for me, I prepare gestalt thinking, which looks at a big picture thing I don't want to have, and then you add the sugar, and then you add the salt, and how do you feel about salt? I would like to, I have a theme with an introduction, a body, and a conclusion, and I would like to be able to present. I'm happy to do it another time or at the end or not at
No,
all.
that's actually okay.
But for me, this kind of, how do you want to live is just, I've been very unimpressed with the process so far. Not here, but with the Comprehensive Plan Committee. I think we need to have a community-wide conversation. I was hoping with everyone here, we could, as we have done, talk back and forth and discuss issues and ask questions.
Or,
Instead of going down a recipe.
So let me do this. First off, for the rest of the group, would you rather do what Joel's suggesting, which is just continue the conversation? Or would you rather go through a step by step? I just want to be respectful for everybody who's here.
Can I suggest that we do a little bit of both, that we go through the format that Kara's got up there, but that we need to be open to a broader conversation when the topic comes up and not get too constrained.
Okay. One suggestion then maybe is that we could read out sort of the things that Kara prepared. And then if you prefer to have the back and forth, we'll try and moderate it to some extent so that we at least stay in some level of a lane, right? And we just don't go off into, we have an hour, right? So just keeping that in mind. We can continue this conversation. We have a second forum, which will be all Zoom, in 3 days' time. So all of you want to show up for that, we can just continue the conversation. Some of you want to show up, we'll just continue the conversation. That's okay too. That way we'll have a good, 3 hours to work through this. So we had a vision statement, right?
so this was under vision, but one of the questions that we came up with when we were thinking about vision was, what role do you think the town should be taking on to address climate change? Now, is that more specific as far as like a concept that you would be more apt? I mean, like, what priorities do you?
Think of these as questions that we've seeded. It doesn't mean you have to necessarily answer every one of them or any of them. You could choose to answer a different question. What we're really attempting to do is prompt the conversation more so than anything else. That's our goal. We're not trying to constrain you to a box, if that makes sense.
If the question is, should we have our vision on how to address climate change, the answer is that that's a tiny part of what I want to focus on.
Okay.
Tiny part.
Okay.
Are there things that you want the town to focus on for climate change? And what are those things?
I would rather put that in the context of a larger picture so that it's in context and it's better understood.
Okay. So Joel,
I don't want to be difficult here.
I know.
Happy to go along with your process.
I'm fine with that. Again, I'm just trying to be respectful of everybody here, right? So what is it that you really want to sort of, what in your mind is sort of the wider thing that you want to talk about? Maybe paint that picture for us so that we can follow along with you.
Well, you want me to speak up here?
Yeah.
Wait, what you're-
Come on.
Take 2 minutes and give us at least the outline,
Focus areas up front and that people can speak to them.
which is what I was trying to do. So
what? Does that work?
it might work.
And then you can
So,
say whatever.
Joel, if you don't mind giving us at least the brief of sort of what it is that you want to talk about, and then we actually give you the space to talk about it. But I just want to make sure the rest of the group's with you.
Okay, what did I not hear in this meeting? Let's start there.
Okay.
First, I just want to say, the people on the Sustainability Committee are my heroes. I see you guys as teammates, you're allies. I don't think that you're necessarily going, you may disagree on strategy, but I think that you have more knowledge than I do and than many in the community do. So what you're about to hear is some serious criticisms of what you're doing. And I'm saying that not to complain about you or criticize you, but to say maybe we need to do a lot more. So that's the focus that I have. So what am I going on about here? All right. I didn't hear a single word talking about the impact of climate change. That's your topic. I didn't hear a single word about talking about the implications. Where are we going to be in 2030? Not what aspirations do we have for our community? Do we want to all have, May Day celebrations in the park? I mean, that's not, talking about aspirations is nonsense to me. There's science behind this. What is the status of the heating that we're seeing? What is the impact on water? How much did I hear in the stretch code discussion or in any of your discussion today about drought and fires? I didn't hear a word, not a single word. Okay, so do I agree with your stretch code? And we had an architect here with excellent knowledge of building codes. Yeah, I'm with you. This is good stuff. We should definitely do that. And I'm not saying you can't do these other things also or do them subsequently. All right, but I think that policy needs to follow your vision of the future, not your aspirations of the future, but the science that's coming at us here. Last year in India, they had numerous days over 42 degrees C wet bulb temperatures. This is beyond my knowledge. 20,000 people died, mostly elderly and very young children. 20,000 people. It's unbelievable, you know? And that's what's coming. And we're talking about LED lighting or wiring for the future. Good. Of course we should do that. I'm with you all the way, 100%. But we're not talking about educating the public of how severe this is. I want to take one example that came up when we had the tree bylaw discussion. This has nothing to do with the tree bylaw. The comment I made was, this is ridiculous what you're doing. You're applying it to the 2 or 3 new developments that are available in Ashland. That's what the planning board said. There's only like 2 major subdivisions left, and that's it. I don't know if that's right, but that's what I heard.
There's a lot of multifamily.
Multifamily. So, but we're not going to apply it to private homes because we'd get too much backlash. We talked about this. I call this timidity, right? I think you're right. I think you'd get horrible backlash. I think that you've observed the situation correctly. And what's the problem with that? That most of the trees are on private property. If you care about trees, you need to start educating the public, and we're not doing that. We talk about, let's just put a little forward here. Let's dip our toe in the water, all right? A couple of other, I'm trying to keep this at a higher level, but Stephen Chu, who is he? CHU, Energy Secretary, not my politics, under Obama, okay? I just watched him about, 2 months ago being interviewed. He said, and I can get you this video if I could find it, I'm sure. He said that we are looking at baked into the model already, a 3-degree rise in temperature, climate temperature, 3 degrees C, right? All of these great conferences they have in Europe when they fly out there in their private jets, all the fat cats from industry, okay? They said, we better limit this to 1.5 degrees. We're almost there, or we are there this past year. And he's talking about 3 degrees. I'm out bike riding in the summer. You're sucking in particulate matter from the Quebec fires last summer. We didn't talk about that. Right? What are we going to do about the fact that there's more fires coming? We have, I just don't see us addressing these things. One last point, and this is a much bigger point that I'm not going to get into all the details about, is water and droughts. What do we do in Ashland when the Hopkinton Reservoir level goes down? We do the right thing. We say, look, we gotta prioritize what we're using water for: drinking water, bathing, cleaning dishes, whatnot. We're gonna not let you water your lawn. No outdoor watering. That's a good thing that we need to do that. It's unfortunate, but we do. And I looked up today, and maybe there's other data, but I looked up how much water does a lawn take to water a lawn. And what I found out was that for a yard of a relatively small size, 30 feet by 40 feet, I mean, there are many much larger than that, it requires 150,000 gallons of water to water that lawn on a hot summer day. And the worst, when you shouldn't be watering the lawn, but on a hot day, it requires 150,000 gallons of, am I getting that right? I'm trying to think about it, whether it's 150 gallons, 150 gallons of water, okay, to water that lawn. I'm sorry, say again? To keep the lawn adequately watered. So I guess that is per day. I can get you more of the data. So, you're a homeowner with your lawn, you're out there watering it in the hot of the summer day, which you shouldn't be doing, and then you even conserve a little bit, you'll water the other half tomorrow or whatever, and you go back into your house and you sit down for your dinner with your family. You have 4 people in your family, and they each eat a half a pound of steak for dinner, okay? Which I think is a reasonable portion. I don't know what people eat because I don't eat steak, okay? Is that a lot? We'll cut it down. What's a right amount? You tell me. Do you have any idea? No?
3 ounces.
3 ounces. All right, let's say 4 ounces. So you're eating a pound of steak, okay, for the 4 people. That's reasonable. How much water did it take to raise that cow to make that 1 pound of steak? How much water? Now, you just watered your lawn, and we cut you off because we have a shortage of water in the town. And we cut you off, and you got, so you can't spend your 125 gallons watering your lawn now. But you go in your house, and you each get 4 ounces. I cheated a little bit. You each get 4 ounces of steak, 4 people, and that's 2,500 gallons of water. And I can get you that data, too. Happy to do it, all right? 2,500 gallons. All right? And we don't talk about that. That's not, you know. So the overriding theme is that we need to start with a vision that we're in very serious trouble here. Very, very serious trouble. And yes, we should be doing everything we can do, this very definitely included. That's great. All right? But it's not, there's some joke about 2 fleas on the back of an elephant arguing who's going to get to control which way it goes. I mean, it's ridiculous. You know, this is nothing that we're doing. So we need to talk about changes to our lifestyles. We need to understand and educate the community, which is really what I'm talking about here. I'm not saying we should ban meat or we should tell people what they have to eat or can eat or whatever. But we need to have them understand the impact of the choices that they make, and we're not doing that. The Sustainability Committee, if it accepts the data about diet and the impact it's having on the climate, needs to be out front and try to inform people so that even if they still have total free choice, at least they have an awareness of the choice they're making. Last thing, the amount of land, and I can get you this data too, the amount of land, right now, 18% of calories in the US comes from meat and dairy. If you add up all the food we eat, 18% of it comes from calories from meat and dairy. 83% of this is global, I shouldn't say US, 18%. 83% of the farmland is taken up with cattle grazing. And all of you here, I am more than certain, are aware of the destruction of the Amazon rainforest and the concerns that that raises to the climate. And if we, the statistic I saw, and you know, I don't know how they compiled this, but they said if we could change the whole world's diet to stop eating meat and dairy, how much of that land could be reforested? Because we're talking about saving some trees here in Ashland, some percentage. And the answer was that we could reforest 75% of the currently 83% of farmland that's used for cattle. We could recover 75%, an area equal to the United States, China, Australia, and Europe. And we don't talk about that, you know. So, you know, am I for saving trees and, you know, cleaning the air with trees? It's all good. It's just not enough. I mean, I just bang my head on the wall when I go home and say, how am I going to get people to respond to this? And I don't know that you can. You know, people like their diet. They haven't been conditioned. You know, last quick point, I'm sorry. During World War II, there was a serious emergency happening. You know, we needed to reorient all of our manufacturing, all of our industry from retail, what do we call it, consumer products into military goods to fight World War II. And the same with food, that massive amounts of food had to be shipped overseas to Army and so on. And what did they do? They called not for price controls, to say, just let the prices go up. That was the concern. They went to FDR and said, we're going to get killed. Only the fat cats are going to be able to buy dishwashers or TV sets. And so what are we going to do about this? And what they decided to do was put in rationing. And that is the non-corporate way of controlling demand, that you put in a system of rationing where you say, look, we're not trying to say nobody can have this, but it shouldn't only be the wealthy who can exploit the climate and exploit our natural resources, that it should be shared through a more equitable program. Okay, that's my rant. I hope, even if you hated it,
You don't get to just make a rant and
that's okay, let me have it.
Great feedback. How would you and what would you see Ashland doing about it?
Oh, my phone's ringing. Hang on a second, let me get rid of this here. Sorry about that, I don't even know how to turn this thing off. Nobody ever calls me. Okay, I gotta go. What would I see Ashland is doing is...
What would you like? What would you see? Like either of those two questions, yeah.
I think the starting point has to be that we have to start a whole bunch of things. I mean, I got a laundry list. The simplest stuff, I would love to see the select board talk about having plant-based food only, how's that one, in the school cafeterias, okay? Yeah, that's gonna go over real well. Yeah.
That's actually a serious topic.
Well, it's a good topic, okay? I went to the Board of Health, I can't remember the gentleman's name, the guy who runs the Board of Health now. I met him one time out here in the parking lot, and I said, blah, 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 vegan is diet and plant-based and all this. He said, oh, I agree with all that, but we can't do that. Well, okay. I guess, I could talk to you for hours about the health benefits of it, but that's not what we're here to talk about. So what I think is that we need to start having through the channels of communication the town has, like the town manager's newsletter, like the select board meetings, like public forums like this one, we need to start educating the public that we think we are, if you think you're just going to skate through the climate crisis that we're in here and just keep living your little life and driving to the mall and driving to the supermarket and all the food shelves are going to be stocked up, the Colorado River is going to dry up in the next 10 years, and they provide more than half of the water to California's agricultural belt. And we're not going to get any food here in Ashland. I would love, what I'd like to talk about sustainability doing is putting aside land so that if we can't get food from across the country or around the world like we can today, if that all dries up, we better make sure that if you want to talk about sustainability, where are we going to be on that day when the food isn't coming anymore? Have we put aside enough, cropland, farmland to be able to sustain ourselves? I would say no. Same with water. So I think that if nothing else, I think that we need to start educating the public about a need to start changing our lifestyles, to talk about what our priorities are and which ones we're willing to swallow and which ones we're not willing to swallow. And for people to have a genuine understanding of what's about to happen. I saw a guy this morning talking about apples. How crazy is this? This is what he said. It was pretty interesting. He's an engineer, this guy. He reached into he said, imagine an oil barrel, nice clean new one, filled up with apples. He said, watch, I can reach over, and he took a bite out of the apple. He said, but now it's gone down a little bit. This is the parallel to the status of oil in the ground. And I have to bend over kind of far, but I can get one. And now there's only a way down at the bottom. He said, what's happening with oil? And he said, and this is going to hit by 2031. We're not talking about 2100 here or some futuristic thing. He said, it is going to cost more to get the oil out of the ground in its energy expenditure than the energy that we get back from the oil. He said it will not make any sense at that point. All right, and his pitch was that it's going to not be oil is not going to be commercially viable. There's a net loss in energy to harvest the energy. He said geologists measure how many barrels of oil are left in the ground. They give you some number, 5 trillion barrels or something. He said, but the reality is to get most of the remaining ones, they're the hardest to reach and the most expensive to reach with the largest energy expenditure. So they're not going to do it. It costs more energy to get it than you'd get from it. And he said that's going to start hitting by 2031, and by 2040 there's not going to be any more oil. Well, what is the sustainability and the stretch code guy here? What do you say about if we're not going to have fuel for our cars, and we're not going to have oil heat for our houses, and so on? These are the arguments being made.
But I just think.
Do you want to come up here?
Wow. I just
We won't be able to
think-
hear you, Rob.
You're describing a doom. I'll say my few cents.
There you go.
I just went to a conference the other day, on the Energize Ashland thing. It was interesting, and one of the keynote speaker was somebody that's called a climate optimist, and you might have seen it. He has written a book. He's very widely, and the idea is really that people that come up with all these doomsday scenarios, that's not the way to solve it. That's really not the way. You have to look at it. You have to get together. You have to look at things and come up with ideas that's going to work. And I think, but Joel will say all these things might happen, but they may not. I think things will change. I think the amount of cars that you're going to see will run on different energies, or whatever the energy may be. I think the amount of carbon that we put in the air is going to change. But it's going to be maybe forced by disasters at one time or another. There'll be disasters. People will make decisions. And I think we're resilient enough. I think that people come up with ideas. So I don't quite believe in this doomsday scenario. I think things will change. And I agree that in 10 years from today, Ashland will probably look different. We don't know yet what it's going to look, but it's going to look different. And we might have to do something about the traffic and the roads and the trees and whatever we're going to be doing here, but it will be gradual. I think it will change. I have somewhat of I'm normally not an optimist, believe me. I'm not an optimist. Right, but I do think, we're not really going to destroy the earth. We're going to solve it. I believe that. My idea.
Just a quick response.
Yeah.
Quick.
30 seconds and then I do
30 seconds is good. 30 seconds is good. I have no idea whether the doomsday scenario is what's coming at us. But there are a lot of very credible sciences. Let's take the International Panel on Climate Change from the UN. Those guys aren't clowns. They know a whole lot more than I do. They're worried about it. So the issue is not whether it's going to happen, but whether we're going to be prepared if it happens. That's what should be worked on right now. I'm hopeful that we can do something. And your whole front bunch of slides, you had CO2, CO2, CO2. And what didn't you have there? What's one of the major contributors to I'm sorry? Methane. That's exactly right. And that comes from beef and cattle raising and clearing forests. Methane. You didn't even mention it. It is said by some that it is a greater contributor to greenhouse gases than all of transportation combined. People they're shocked. That can't be right. I'm done. Thank you. Sorry to be all crazy. But.
This is what the forum's for?
On the topic of methane, one thing is it goes with cattle only if they are grain-fed, not if they are grass-fed. It's very interesting. And the other thing is the major source of methane is gas leaks. And we lose about 4% of all the gas, right up. Anyway, I want to say that I generally am of Joel's persuasion. I'm very pessimistic, but I also have the feeling of look, we got to do what we can do. We work at it, we try, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But there's no sense in not trying because this is a major issue. Anyway, I'm sorry, I'll stop.
No, you should.
My turn.
First of all, Mark DeSoni, to open everything for what Carl was trying to get going, and this is what we're here for. Then we went down Nostradamus Lane. History and data does not make a future. History and data are just numbers for when it was already history. To the open discussion on sustainable priorities is worth a future. I'm looking at it as what numbers down the road can happen and what numbers on the road can be for the time. I'm trying to make sense about it, but there are a couple people that walked out. It's okay. I'm used to it.
No, ignore. Keep going.
I'm used to it, okay. Science, what makes this earth, science will grow this town. I want to have the understanding that we can talk back and forth, have two different directions. But to make sense, we need to have an opportunity to do a two-way street, to talk back and forth, to compromise, to have an understanding that people want to know what's going on either in the future or what happened in the past can make the better future. So I'm being very serious about this, but I'm talking real slow finding my words. I'm 110% for the progress that sustainability is doing. 110% for the meeting in the window, comprehensive plan. 110% for this town to get out of the way of itself from the past history to grow a future. I want this to be working together, but I also want Generation Z that's coming up behind us to realize that we're not looking back in what they never heard of and have them be taught what they never thought, what their parents didn't even tell them. So we're going forward, meeting in the box, sustainability, town of Ashland, and the stretch code. I'm one for not only housing, 40B and whatever, but I'm here for buildings, mixed-use buildings, in the same code that can we work this downtown as a project so that Metro West can see Ashland. And instead of going across the world, in the air and all that stuff, stay Metro West, stay Ashland, be strong. Thank you.
So just a quick outside perspective with someone who's not a part of the Sustainability Committee. I find that in talking to people in town, if we can communicate the positives that are happening with sustainability, I think is really critical, and then we reinforce that, even on a micro level. I think what you talked about was high level, macro level, which we have to talk about as well. But I think it's also important, for example, whether this is true or not, it's the data that I receive. So with my solar panels last month, my CO2 reduction apparently was 1,262 pounds, which they say is the equivalent to 10 trees. So if there's a way to have data that we communicate through the town manager or through the economic director, through the Sustainability Committee, I get your newsletter as well, and we share that information positively with the town, the amount of young people that are moving to Ashland is pretty real. And a lot of young people do care very much about what we're talking about, not just the gray hairs in the room. And so I think we want to really connect with them because they're our future. And I think it's important to get some of those young folks in this committee. but also talk about the little things that are happening and that difference that it is making. I think it's important that we don't forget that.
Do you know about Energize Ashland?
What's that?
Energize Ashland, have you heard of it?
I've heard of it, yes.
But that's just what you.
Oh, it is, it's mentioned, yes. Great, well, that's what I'm talking about. But I think you mentioned it as well.
Anybody, at this stage, I think everybody's just taking a chance, so I'm not gonna try and go back to the format, like, we don't have enough time, so. Thoughts, I think you're just sharing thoughts anyway, and I think we're getting some aspects of it out anyway. I've seen Kara sort of fast note take there anyway, so. Any other thoughts in the room? Go.
I want to complain about Joel. Here he is. He's chair of the town Upper Charles Trail. Thank you, Joel. And you know, just putting one little trail through town. We need, if we're serious about reducing the amount that people drive, we need to be able to get from my house up on Oregon Road, way up in the corner there, down to the trail so that I can get to the high school, to the center of town. So we need to be thinking more expansively about the trail so that we think about how do we do this so that this becomes a means of transportation? I know some people will bike, some people get their little electric bikes or whatever. Any of that's better than everybody driving around town. So I just wanted to, Joel's been giving us trouble. I thought I'd give him trouble.
We're getting it. And anybody else have thoughts?
Sure.
Go for it.
Oh, thank you.
Please. Because I would like to reserve maybe about 5 to 7 minutes just to summarize everything I've been hearing and maybe bring this sort of to at least some kind of output, if that makes sense.
Hi, my name's Amanda. I live over on Weston Road by Cedar. To kind of take what Joel was talking about and bring it back to what we would really like to see in the future for Ashland. Personally, I grew up in a place where you could walk to things. And I lived in Boston where you could walk to things and take public transportation. And I realized that I moved to a suburb. That was my decision. But it would be really nice if we could reduce some of the use of cars in general, but especially obviously the ones that use gas, if we could walk to more places. If I wanted to get to a place where I could ride my bike with my children, I would have to put my bikes in my car and drive to a place where I could ride bikes, because I live on off of Cedar Road, which anybody from Ashland knows isn't safe for anything except cars. And I feel like a lot of our community is like that. We can't walk to places, we can't safely bike to places. We are required to use our cars. So if we want to reduce some of that transportation cost, CO2-wise cost, I would like to see the town do something about that. I'd like to be able to ride or walk. As far as farmland, real good idea. My sister's a farmer. She was a farmer in Weston. She's now a farmer out in Beverly. And some of those towns have agricultural space set aside. Now, let's be honest, it's because they don't want developers to come in and put multi-use family housing on it, or multifamily housing, sorry. But nonetheless, there is farmland, quality farmland. But if we have quality farmland in Ashland, are we then taking away places where we could grow trees? It's a balance. So I'd like people to talk about that. I think having a community farm where people who don't have a backyard big enough to put a garden, like I do, could have a plot of land where they could grow some of their own food. I'm from Detroit. That's a big thing there. It's things like that where I don't think we can really address methane. We don't, as far as I'm aware, we don't have a lot of cows in Ashland. I could be wrong.
Where do they come from?
Yes, true. But we cannot mandate as the town of Ashland what people eat. Can we educate them? Absolutely. But we can't, as the town, do anything about that. We can continue to have NSTAR fix all the holes in their gas pipes like they did on my street, great. Yeah, yes, no?
Yeah.
I mean, we can, as a town, I imagine we can ask about that. I imagine we can't make NSTAR do anything. But, or, who is it now? Eversource,
Yeah.
thank you. I'm stuck like 5 years ago. But anyway, so as far as the vision goes, I'd like to see us have a few more sustainable things in the town. If we're gonna build the YMCA, I'd really like it to be a sustainable building. I agree 100% with the stretch code that we already have, and the opt-in code I think is fabulous. As Ash said, it gives people the ability to make better choices in the future without having to like put out a whole bunch of cash out of pocket and a whole bunch of effort and undo some of the building practices that we would like to prevent. So I think that's all I have to say. Did that answer any of the meeting in a box questions?
So, it's interesting. I wanted to change the order of some of the questions initially because I thought in talking about specific features that we'd like to see in the future, like walkability or bike paths or transportation in general or our buildings, I thought it would get us to our vision, but some people disagreed with it, and so we went with the original.
Some people disagreed with that.
But I think this does take from big picture of why we need to do all this stuff. I think everyone in this room has an appreciation for sustainability and the real
Cara,
big.
do you wanna?
Yeah, why don't you summarize? I was gonna do this, so you're doing it anyway.
So anybody who knows me more, I have a degree in environmental studies. So like I studied it regardless of how depressing climate change is. There's a lot of negative things that are going to happen if we do nothing. But being depressed about it isn't gonna get us anywhere. No. So I feel like what we want to do here today, what we want to do going forward is taking the small steps every day and getting us to better. I don't think we're going to be perfect, to be honest. I think we are going to feel some of the effects. But I don't want to sit and complain about it. I want to start taking the small steps. That's why I spend some of my hard-earned free time on the Sustainability Committee. I have a family, I have a job. It's not easy to make the time, but I believe it's important. So with that being said, I heard a lot of things of education and making better choices as a town. And I think that's where we have to go with it. The data is out there. Getting people to believe it or read it is a whole nother thing. I think education, we need help also from the community to support us. So I would like to thank everybody that came here, that didn't have to be here, because it matters and it helps us. You're a key part of it. So does that summarize it enough for you guys?
I think you did a pretty good job.
All right.
I will take 2 minutes to start. We've got 10 more minutes, so,
I just wanted to make a little point about Energize Ashland. I don't know if you heard, but it went officially live today as a website. And it's a grassroots organization where people in the town, mostly residents, but businesses can do as well, can sign up to a website and enter actions of things that they have already taken in their house, or if they have not taken them, maybe plan to do them. And then these actions
get a score of how much trees or carbon you're actually saving. Is exactly that's what he's saying, and you get a credit for it, and it gets accumulated, and you write testimonials about the things that you're actually doing in town. So it's inspirational. So you want to inspire your neighbors and tell people what you're doing. And these actions are all the way from putting solar on your roof to making little changes in your yard, or do even some actions that you want to vote for the stretch code, anything like that. So anything that helps to bring the whole idea of climate change, you know, make some improvements in people's life in Ashland, just for the town of Ashland. So it's grassroots, and we like to have everybody participate and do something, and it's just a way to communicate. It's not sure how much, you know, I'm trying to be realistic. It's not going to save the world, but it's going to do maybe something. That's my point.
All right, I think we're getting right about at time. So first off, thank you, all of you, for spending time with us on a Saturday, right? It's super valuable that you did come out. Thank you, Dylan, for making the extra time. I know you had another commitment, and I was so happy when I saw you walked in. I was a little shocked when you walked in as well. But I'm glad you did, because I think it added a lot of value to the conversation. Couple of thoughts. I think Kara did a really good job of summarizing sort of a lot of the conversation we had here. Personally, you know, I have to be hopeful, because otherwise I get too depressed and I stop working. But Joel, I couldn't agree more with you that there is a massive problem, right? Chuck reminds us on pretty much every meeting that this is not just a crisis; it's a crisis of epic proportions, and we have to do something about it. I think where we've tried to focus, though, is the things that we can do about it in our way, in our town, and still make some progress with it. Are we doing enough? I don't think anything that we do is going to ever be enough, but certainly you've seeded a few thoughts and ideas here. I do want to flag that when it comes to methane specifically, or any of those gases, one of the key reasons where shifting towards electrification is this critical is because instead of all of that natural gas, even if the grid does not turn, you know, renewable overnight, all of that natural gas or coal or, you know, energy that's right now being piped to individual houses, instead of it going to individual houses, even if every bit of it went to just creating more electricity, we'd still see a massive decrease in the amount of both gas usage as well as leakage, because now you'd effectively have a centralization function, and then what's really getting piped is electricity, which, you know, doesn't leak in quite the same way. And as I made the point earlier, you know, electrification is the one path we do have that is got any hope of actually changing, you know, how we consume energy. And energy at the end of the day does drive a big portion of the climate change problem. As regards to food, as regards to, you know, farmland, I think you talked about, you know, I heard about education. Certainly we can do a lot more about education. I think the Energize Ashland site, you know, is a largely a response to our own inadequacy as a committee to do that, right? And we're super grateful for that group that they've gotten together and sort of doing it at a grassroots level. But the goal of the committee so far has been really more focusing on the legislative changes that we can make so that they actually impact policy in town. And that's sort of how we see ourselves being most effective. I'm more than happy for us to take a wider role. Keep in mind we're 5 people, you know, who try to kind of push it. So, but between these initiatives, between your support, I think we could be doing a lot more. So I'd love to continue that conversation. We do have another session on Thursday from 7 to 9. You know, so if you can make that, that'd be great. We will still spend about 20 minutes at least, or 30 minutes on the stretch code for folks who haven't seen it. I do plan to take the first half of this and absolutely promote the heck out of it in front of town meeting. I don't think we'll get quite the kind of participation we got as with you guys both being here, right? There were really great points of view and input there. So I think that's valuable for the town to see as well. So we will make sure that we take this video and actually share it wide. But separate from that, thank you again for making the time. If you're willing to join us again and continue this conversation, we've got another 2 hours set up to do just that. And we can, you know, go past other topics that we weren't able to cover quite as much today. Yeah, if you don't join us, show up at town meeting, vote. That's what is going to make changes. Otherwise, thank you so much.